Hello, everybody. It's Gemini Jess and Dorje here. And this
Hi.
is week 4 of Gridiron Astrology, football astrology, where we use astrology to understand the possible outcomes of an upcoming NFL game. We've been pretty good so far. We were just really solid on 2 of them. One of them were a little bit shaky. That was last week's game. But this week's game is the Jaguars versus the 49ers and has some very compelling and interesting narratives to dive into. Jaguars are roaring ferociously forward in their season and may be the real deal this year. Trevor Lawrence is like showing up and he's not like slinging the ball into too many interceptions yet, but we'll see if that holds up. Meanwhile, the 49ers, they keep winning despite themselves. They've had all of these injuries. They've overpaid superstars who are sitting on the sidelines right now and may be so for weeks to come. So do the Jaguars smell blood? Do they sense that the 49ers are weak? Are they going to take a bite out of the 3-0 wounded 49ers with their incredible defense? Or will they go for the jugular and then miss and then have the 49ers stomp all over them? Well, we're going to see what the astrology reveals about this. Jess and I are both professional astrologers who use traditional and modern analysis to get to the heart of these questions. And it's fascinating to me. I don't know about you, Jess, but like just every week we look at the astrology chart and we see the themes in the games. We see the
Absolutely.
themes in the games. Yeah, absolutely amazing. So then another thing is if you listen to this and you enjoy it, then please like, subscribe, share it. Your appreciation keeps us in the work of exploring the intersection of football and astrology, which is a pretty narrow field, not many of us doing it. So your appreciation keeps us going.
Yes.
So then, first, before we get on, I'd like to review, if possible, the Chiefs versus the Giants game. Um, I felt like I was kind of like suggesting that the Giants would win, and boy, did I get that wrong. Did you have the chart up handy? Would you be able to share the chart on that?
I can see if I have it. I might not, but hopefully, and if I do, I will certainly share it. Searching Astro Gold as one does. So this would be Chiefs, and it was at the Giants. I might not at all. No, I do. I lied. I have it.
I knew
What?
you had it. I knew you had it. You're like a very prepared woman, and it's amazing. It's like, I will lose things left and right, and then you'll be like, "Oh yeah, here it is, deep in the books." Okay, great, awesome. There it
Sorry,
is.
it's
Yeah,
the, it's the Placidus house system. I know that's
not a
frustrating.
Placidus. I mean, what would probably most people still use Placidus in the astrology world. I know there's a strain of us who are whole sign men. What do you think? Is that true?
I think, yeah, it's a pretty good mix. I love whole sign too, so it's not that I'm writing it off. This is just kind of where I set up shop most of the time.
Yeah. So then the reason why we're kind of like not certain about this game, if I remember correctly, is Taurus was the rising that was going to go to the Chiefs, and then Scorpio was the setting that was going to go to the Giants. And so I felt like that Mars going to the Giants and Venus going to the Chiefs Mars had the advantage, but I feel like I really missed or didn't pay attention to the idea of Mars being in an aneretic degree being a sign of tremendous weakness.
Yes.
I'm not a believer in aneretic degrees because, when you're giving readings to people, you pull up their charts and you see that aneretic degree and you see like, oh, their Jupiter's in an aneretic degree. And like, you don't tell someone like, well, you're going to be poor your whole life because your Jupiter's in an aneretic degree. So I
Absolutely not.
don't pay attention to it. But maybe you do need to pay attention to that in event charts. What are your thoughts, Jess?
My thought is twofold. I did track a couple of the other games where this transiting Mars was concerned, and it's out of sign, but it is applying to a square with Pluto. We've just had that. I typically don't really look at Pluto when I'm looking at these charts, but now I'm thinking maybe I need to because this is pretty close, all things considered. Factor is Venus in the fifth house. The fifth house in sports astrology, as far as I'm understanding it, is like this is who we are putting on a pedestal. Sometimes I track that sign as the players to keep an eye out on, at least for the first, quarter or the first half of the game. But I think that may also be a factor in favor of the Chiefs in this regard.
Well, I mean, the fifth house is where Venus rejoices.
Yeah,
Sixth
good
house is
point.
where Mars rejoices, though. So I mean, okay, we don't need to litigate last week's game. Obviously, we know that the Chiefs won,
Yes.
that the Giants crumbled apart after having a really good showing the first half. I mean,
Yes.
first half, I thought the Giants were going to win, uh, but then they just crumbled apart. And maybe mostly because Russell Wilson just kept throwing the ball all over the place, and the Chiefs kept catching it where he was throwing it.
Yep.
So he got benched for that. He's now out, but that might have been his last game in his life as a
Truly. We should
starter.
look at his transits. We should have seen what was going on.
True. Yeah. But I do think, like, you could say, well, that Mars in Libra,
Yeah.
to me, that's very much Russell Wilson in a way. Like, I don't know if you've followed his personality much, but he's known for giving these airhead interviews where he's like, just you just feel like he's so incredibly shallow and there's nothing really there. And forgive me for saying this, all of you Libras, but people do say that about Libras, that it is one of the most surface oriented of all the signs.
This is
Yeah. And so it's that last degree, and Mars is like an athlete. So the last moment of an athlete. You could see that in there. You could put in that narrative. Yeah, so anyways, that didn't work so well. This week we have, again, as we mentioned, we have the Jaguars, who have a great defense. They're allowing just 17 points per game, which is really incredible. That's tied for fifth best in the league so far, tied with my Seahawks, who also are allowing 17 points per game. Their
okay.
run really stout. That might come into action. Brock Purdy has been injured. He is coming back, but his throwing might not be as good as it should be. The Jaguars have been really opportunistic. They've been forcing turnovers. It's their veteran unit-wide contributions, tons of tackles, forced fumbles, interceptions, evenly distributed amongst all the players. They have a new defensive coordinator, Anthony Campbell, and so he's like turned their defense around 180. Also, they're having like really great show offs, like Foyesade Olokun has had big games, 10 tackles, an interception, forced fumble in the opening game. So their defense is really, really hot. They're having a hard time getting pressure and sacks from their pressures. They're getting pressures, but they're not getting sacks from their pressures. And this could really show up if Purdy's hot, because Purdy is one of those quarterbacks that when he's on, the only way to stop him is sack him and get him off his game. But if he's on and you're not able to get to him, he is going to carve up a defense. He has that kind of like mentality of just being super aware of the field and having great vision on the field. So then against the past, the Jaguars have not been as dominant as they have been against the run. So I'm imagining that San Francisco is going to tackle them with a lot of passing. Their offense has been mid, and it's a Trevor Lawrence offense. So what can you expect? They've scored
True.
70 points over 3 games, average of 23.3 points per game, which is why they're winning. If you're scoring 23 and you're only allowing 17, that's going to be some W's in your column.
Certainly.
Total offense, they're averaging 356 yards per game, which is decent. 214 passing yards, 13th, not so great. Rushing yards per game, 141, which is fifth, which is good. They have a great, great running game. And I think that's going to come into play because Nick Bosa is out. How much do you think Nick Bosa being out is going to affect the 49ers?
Oh, we'll see. I mean, if Brock Purdy's back, that I think it may be enough. Might be enough for them, at least historically. I am interested to see in the chart I was seeing that the 49ers are not at 100%, so that could be a
Oh,
reflection of
there we
that.
go. Yeah.
But I'm hopeful. I shouldn't say hopeful. I'm not like super strongly oriented toward either of these teams, but I'm hopeful that with Purdy being back, that is sort of the captain of the ship and is able to orient them toward a win potentially.
I can tell you're not a Seahawks fan because I am hopeful that it is not the case. Okay, but so Trevor Lawrence has been playing like Trevor Lawrence. Like let's be
Yeah.
honest, four
Yeah.
touchdowns, four interceptions,
Yeah.
like one for one, and no reason for that to change. That's just the way he is. Travis Etienne 270 rushing yards. So he's 90 yards per game and one rushing touchdown so far. So their RB1 is just okay. They're kind of mid, but
Yeah.
they do have a balanced offense. The defense getting the turnovers. They have a +5 turnover differential, which is nuts because that is part of what's making a difference in the game. So they're in a better place than they've been, but they're coming up against the 49ers. Now the 49ers are 3-0. Seems like they're steamrolling. Every single game so far that they played, they should have lost, especially to the Seahawks, but they didn't. They pulled it out in the end. Total offensive yards, 1,083, 361 yards per game. So they're doing a little better than the Jags there. 311 yards total rushing per game. It's 103. So they're kind of good. Leader, Mac Jones has been the passing leader, of course. Purdy's been out. Christian McCaffrey, 176 yards rushing so far. Well, that's not great. Ricky Parcells, 281 receiving yards. So they're kind of like on their second string. They have had a lot of output with their vertical threats, big down plays, which of course the 49ers are famous for, and their rushing game, solid 100 yards. How that matches up against the Jaguars, I'm really curious to see, because if you take away the rushing game and you make Purdy one-dimensional, it puts a lot of pressure on him. And I've just seen him crumble under those high pressure games, especially if some sacks are in.
He's still a relatively young quarterback, right?
He is. He's relatively young. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
There is this kind of thing that happens when quarterbacks have been in the league for 10 years. Like if you watch Aaron Rodgers or if you watched even Sam Darnold recently or Jared Goff, like they're just so relaxed about it. They just look across the field and then they make their toss and then it works or it doesn't work. Purdy still looks like he's trying to analyze things a little bit, at least to my eye.
Yeah, I
What
hear.
what are your thoughts?
I agree. I think he's still sort of getting his, I don't know, his footing. Not to say that he's bad. He's been good. I believe he has an updated contract, right? Where he's
That's
actually
right. Yeah.
fairly compensated. So
Huge compensation.
I didn't know what did they do you know what they finalized on? Because I believe he was under 1 million to begin with, which is wild compared to, what he did for them. But
Yeah, I thought it was like 250, 260 million. Could be wrong. I think he's getting,
but it's
you
way up
know,
there.
I,
Okay.
I think he's like set for life. His
Yeah.
family's set for life. His mom
Yeah.
probably has a new house. His dad's probably got a new car. I love these football players. I've got my kids in football, and they're probably never going to be in the NFL, or even if they got in college, it'd be great. Hope they don't listen to this and get mad at me. But like these kids who like grow up and then they like take care of their parents. They're like, oh yes, I'm gonna like spend this million on giving you a new house. And like you read that story in the NFL. I don't know if that's just NFL propaganda or if that's just what they all do.
I feel like
Uh,
that's what many of them do. Yeah.
yeah, right. Yeah. Is that because like in order to put your body through that, you have to be kind of like a simple family person?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe in some instances, these are people who perhaps don't really come from wealth, and so they have this
True.
opportunity and
Yeah.
they're so rooted to their like deeper values and their deeper understanding of like what is meaningful. And so they're like, okay, back to the community, back to my family, back to my friends. That's where this money is going.
I love that.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that be how we all are?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
family, community, friends, supporting each other. Yeah,
Uplifting
I
each
really
other.
do love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because, there's this attitude that football is a really like terrible game. I think it's because people get concussions. My
Yeah.
son got a concussion yesterday, 2 days ago, yesterday. So it does happen. But there is also a wholesomeness to it as a game. And it's one of those things though, like, but because of the concussions and because of the intensity of it, you also get these players who then pop off and do really mean things. And that gets like highlighted.
Mhm.
And whereas most players are really doing strong community oriented, family oriented, positive work. Yeah, like the Walter Payton Man of the Year award goes out to who's giving the most to the community. Often those guys are giving tens of millions of dollars and time into the community. Russell Wilson, every year he goes and he spends time on the children's orthopedic surgeon floors and like goes and connects with all the kids. And it seems like really, really positive. So I
Absolutely.
don't know. There's just a lot of nuance in my mind about like what it is to be a football player and how most of them are really good people.
Yeah, I honestly very much agree with that. And just seeing, the different holiday drives. And I also think that it's sort of instilled at the collegiate level, being connected with the community, trying to plug in, trying to, I don't know. It's just it's not a position where you sort of skyrocket to fame. I mean, in some instances, obviously it is, but it's usually not this role where you skyrocket to fame and then that's it, and you just throw away, everything that you stood for whatever reason, it seems like the program, again, at the collegiate level and at the NFL level, really tries to make sure these people are connected with their communities, even with, I know, the parades, which they have with other sports as well. But like, that's a huge way to just see and connect with these people who a lot of people idolize, honestly, especially in our country.
Yeah, yep. I love it. Well, let's get to the chart and the
Absolutely.
delineation. I'm sorry people were waxing poetic about football, but this is football and astrology. So
Yes,
hopefully, if you're listening,
absolutely.
you're loving it.
Yeah, so we are going to start with the Frawley method. This is the Placidus house system for the Jaguars 49ers game at 1:05 p.m. That's correct. Please tell me this is correct.
That's correct. Yes, that is when it's starting down there. Have you ever
I
been to Santa Clara Stadium?
I have not.
No, it's super nuts because it's in the middle of Silicon Valley, and you go in,
Ooh.
and you would think it would be the most hyped up modern
Yeah.
stadium there is, but it looks like a 70s horse racing track. I watched the Seahawks and the 49ers play in it, and I was just stunned because I expected like the ultra Google modernism. And to me, it was like, oh yeah, like cocaine, sunglasses, cigars, big hats, and cheap bets. That I mean that was the vibe of it. Fascinating stadium. Yeah.
That's excellent. Sounds like it has a lot of character, which I very much appreciate.
Definitely. Yeah, it's got that 70s character. Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So this is the event chart that we have using Frawley's method. There were only a few things that stood out, but the things that stood out are more tangible than what we've had in the prior games. Again, I'm using, to the
Cool.
best of my knowledge, his method. Is it 100% accurate? Who's to say? But I'm doing my best. So the first thing that we notice here in this chart, I'm just going to get right to it. I'm not going to delineate through the lens that I use in terms of this ruler is for this planet, so on. I really just want to talk about what we see going on. So the moon is describing the flow of events for Frawley's method, and the moon is in the sign of Sagittarius. It is angular. Because it's angular, that has some sort of impact on the outcome of the game per his method.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
it's very close to the inside of this first house cusp. And if the moon is applying to or close inside the first house or the 10th house, then the victory goes to the favorite. Now, I did look up who is favored for this game. It is the 49ers. And so that's 1 point for the 49ers. So that's where we
Oh boy. Do not like hearing that.
Next, the next point that we have is the part of fortune and the anti-scion associated with the part of fortune. The part of fortune, I believe, is 6 degrees in the sign of Pisces. Do I have it on the chart? I'm looking at, yes, I do. So 6 degrees in the sign of Pisces and the anti-scion's at 23 degrees in the sign of Libra. Now, in that instance, what do we find? The moon is applying to a sextile with the anti-scion. Because the moon is at 23 degrees and 2 minutes, and the anti-scion of the part of fortune is at 23 degrees and 42 minutes. So it's almost exact. Frawley loves this, and it is applying. And so what we see here is the moon is conjoining, trining, or sextile the part of fortune or the anti-scion of the part of fortune. In this case, it is forming again a sextile positive aspect to the anti-scion. And so here again, this is favoring the favorite, which is the 49ers. This is the
Oh
first time
boy.
I've agreed with Frawley since we've started the season. So interesting. So that's 2 points for the favorites. And for this last component where we're looking at aspects to Fortuna or its anti-scion, that is what Frawley considers final, meaning you don't need to go any further. That tells you who the winner is. From what we've seen in past weeks, is that sufficient? No, it hasn't been. He is
Yeah,
not.
Frawley hasn't been winning. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, hasn't been winning the last few weeks. Although he did win last week.
Yeah. No, he
Yeah.
said Giants, I think.
Oh,
He's,
last week? Oh,
I was
yeah.
thinking, I thought Chiefs, his method, I think said Giants, but nonetheless,
Hmm.
this would be the first win if the 49ers do win, where Frawley is accurate. We do have a point for the underdogs, but if it's if we're getting a little bit loose and flexible with his framework. So the aspects to the heart of fortune. Here we're looking at the Lord of the seventh house conjoining Fortuna or its anti-scion. So if we look here, we have, of course, Mercury as the ruler of the Lord of the seventh house, which is Mercury in the sign of Libra. Now, he does say close aspects. As I mentioned, the anti-scion for this part of fortune is at 23 degrees, a little bit wide. But if we are willing to consider it, sorry, throwing things around on my desk, then this is 1 point, 1 point for the underdogs. It's questionable. I wanted to have more to talk about for Frawley. So 2 points for the favorite, 1 point for the underdog. In this framework, this would have the 49ers winning. Now, I did go into it myself through my own lens, and Dorje, if you want to jump in at any point in this regard, please do. But just very briefly, what stood out to me is the moon is rising at the start of the game. For me, that's
Hmm.
suggesting potentially a pretty significant turnover, like a lot of back and forth. Like there's a lot of instability at the start of the
Oh,
game.
interesting.
Like
Yeah.
this is echoed a little bit with Uranus in the sixth house. I'm looking at the sixth house as like, this is how we are getting things done for the game. And it's weird. There's some type of erratic behavior. We still have this trine that we talked about last week between Uranus and Pluto. The sun is part of the conversation. It's separating, but it's still relatively close. Trine here. There's something where it's like, it is unstable. And what I think is happening, I think that the away team here, the away team would be the Jaguars. They're associated with Jupiter in the sign of Cancer, which is in the seventh house Placidus, but importantly in the eighth house whole sign. I think that they are better resourced than the 49ers thought or would think. And I also think the Jaguars are able to accurately prey on the weaknesses the 49ers are still displaying. The reason I think it's important to discern between the seventh and the eighth house is, again, I am very much a yes and astrologer, yes, Placidus, and also whole sign. Sure, why not? But if Jupiter is considered in the eighth house, it is not making a major aspect to the ascendant. I have found, and I think that you may have as well, in last week's games, even if it's exalted, even if it's doing really well, if it is in a dark house, it seems like it's not functioning as strongly as it should. So that's kind of what I'm thinking with regards to the Jaguars. The home team would be associated with the descendant in the way that I look at the chart. So that puts this angular, at least in the Placidus house system, Mercury as the ruler associated with the 49ers. And so, kind of neutrally oriented in general, but it is angular. And so I do think that this is in a sense, oh, the 49ers look like they know what they're doing. They look like they're doing all
Hmm.
right. But then the Jaguars are kind of pushing back. And it's like, oh, like the 49ers are not in tip-top shape. There is some type of issue sort of behind the scenes. Another thing that I noted is the 49ers in general do not seem to be at full capacity in terms of their efforts, but they're able to work with their resources very effectively. And I think that that is to the advantage of the 49ers. The reason I'm saying that is Mercury is in the sign of Libra. It's ruled by this Venus in the sign of its fall, Virgo Venus. And this is applying to a conjunction with the South Node. So it
Mm.
just feels like there is some type of disparity with regards to the resources that they would typically have versus what they're currently working with. Sabian symbol, curious what you have to say about this. We always look at the degree ahead. So we would look at the midheaven at 9 degrees in the sign of Libra. 3 old masters hanging in a special room in an art gallery. Sometimes
Oh,
they seem to
cool.
speak to each other. I thought about the bird's eye view room. Maybe somebody unexpectedly in that space. Don't know if we would ever know about that. But I'm curious if there is something at play with that box and the person who's calling the plays who is like, oh, there's the weakness for the 49ers and the Jaguars look sharper than we would potentially expect. Do you have any thoughts about the Sabian symbol?
So Liam Cohen is the head coach of the Jaguars. Do you know his coaching tree where he comes from? And
Not deeply, no.
right. Neither do I. And then Kyle Shanahan, of course, is the head coach of the 49ers. I feel like that's speaking again towards I just hate saying this. I feel like that's speaking again to the 49ers.
No.
And because the 49ers have such kind of like a mastery of the game of the coaching, the
Absolutely.
Shanahan tree
Yeah.
is known for its mastery. But then also, who owns the Jaguars?
I don't know. I don't track them very closely for Florida
I
teams.
don't either. I have to. Shahid Khan. Shahid Khan owns the Jaguars. Let's see. What's Shahid Khan do? Oh, that's interesting. Pakistani American billionaire and sports tycoon. He also owns the full FC of the Premier Football Club of the Premier League. So he has several football. He has several sports teams that he owns. He also owns All Elite Wrestling.
Wow.
That's fascinating. Really, really involved. How did he make his money? Founded and expanded his auto parts company, Flex and Gate.
Okay.
Interesting. Which he bought in 1980s and grew into a global supplier of auto part of bumper design. See, the way people become billionaires, like I don't know, it's karmic, right? It's in the chart somewhere. That's
Absolutely.
amazing. Yeah, but the 49ers are owned by a very old family of 49ers. Who owns the 49ers? Denise DeBartolo York. The York family owns the 49ers. Um, and how did they make their money? This is what I love doing with Sabian symbolism, going
Yes.
until I
Yeah.
find why that symbol is there.
Absolutely.
And inherited a significant stake of real estate. I think they're big art supporters. Anyways, other things that you commented on that I just kind of like wanted to mention is if you are using a quadrant-based house system like Placidus, then that 17-degree Libra ruling the 49ers is trying the cusp of the seventh,
Right.
giving it that strength. And that's one of the things you get if you're using quadrants that you don't get necessarily if you're using whole sign. And I think it's one of the biggest arguments that quadrant-based house astrologers have for the value of it over whole sign. There's reasons why I think whole sign is better. Like I think the even distribution of the houses and the signs and the information that comes within that rather than having intercepted houses, it is actually quite meaningful, although there's nuance also in intercepted houses and information. So really, I feel like good astrologers, which I don't count myself amongst, they can use both. They can flip through both in order to find the information, just like Googling something that
Yeah.
gives the answer and the inquiry to what they're looking for. And that was just kind of like one of the things that, popped out of my mind. Here, I'll throw up the whole sign and give it
Fantastic.
a quick look. Let's see if I can share that.
Well,
I got it. There we go. And so this is a first, second half. I'm going to go back to the first half.
okay.
And the first half here, we'll start with the first half. And by the first half, then we have here the ascendant is going to be the challenger.
Yes.
And so this is a little bit different way of looking at it because the moon being a luminary being in the first half, according to the Bonatti tradition, would give a lot of strength to the challenger.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it is close to the ascendant. It gives a lot of strength to that. So I'm going to give 1 point to the Jaguars for that. However, I think you're right. The ascendant is not being aspected by its ruling planet, Jupiter. So even though Jupiter is really kind of like strong and wanting to do a lot of good, it's not aspecting. And this was something that you mentioned being in a dark house or a house of aversion. And what's the theory behind that? In your mind or in your understanding of why a dark house or an adverse house doesn't help out if it doesn't in the planet that it's not aspecting or the point that it's not aspecting.
I think that's a great question. I have my own thoughts. I think in natal astrology, personally, it's not necessarily a one-to-one. Like, I don't think somebody personally, again, is under-resourced if their ascendant ruler, for example, is in like the eighth house or the sixth house. It's a different tempo, but I don't think that in and of itself is like, well, there you go. You're, as you mentioned earlier, you're never
Yeah.
going to have any wealth. No, like that's not really where I am oriented toward in that space. But what I've noticed within the sphere of football games in particular is sometimes the opponent or the home team will have this very dignified planet, but as the game progresses, it seems to fall apart. And around those times, we see perhaps the ascendant ruler fall into the sixth house, or we see the descendant ruler
Interesting.
push into the second house. And so for me, it almost feels as though those planets, even if they are well resourced, get an additional boost, or they are sort of pushed to the next level when there is this sense of visibility. Whereas I feel like if you were able to do sort of like a one-to-one comparison, it may be they start getting tired. Like the team is starting to, the defense is starting to fall apart a little bit. The game is
Hmm.
progressing. They are not really necessarily seeing eye to eye. There might be a breakdown in the communication of plays, things like this. And that's
Beautiful.
how I'm attributing
Yeah.
that. But I don't know. What do you think?
I no, I really find that everything you said there is to be true. And I think it comes from an idea of light and
Yeah.
the ability to provide support. And that would make sense with like becoming exhausted or becoming worn out as the game goes on. And, it's just the idea that that planet is there, it wants to do good, but it cannot reach the ascendant. It cannot give its energy directly to the ascendant. It can provide a background that's percolating well, but it just doesn't give that energy directly there. That becomes what we call an accidental detriment, or, accidental dignity of detriment. Then not being able to reach that point and give it the energy. So the ascendant's a little bit like, hey, I'm not there. In the Greek astrology, then the ascendant not being averse to its ruler is given the metaphorical analogy of a ship without a captain. That the
Oh,
captain is not at the steering wheel and cannot direct how things go. And so you get less of the drive.
yeah.
And if Trevor Lawrence, I don't think he's known necessarily for being this like, I'm going to will the game to go the way I want it to, like most of the great quarterbacks do. Like you get Aaron Rodgers, or you get Tom Brady, or you get Patrick Mahomes. The great quarterbacks, they just will the team to victory.
Yeah.
And I Trevor Lawrence isn't really known for that. Like, or at least the games I've seen, he's just kind of like out there slinging it around, and hopefully it works. And it's kind of the
Yes.
defense this year so far that's making it work. Will that continue against the 49ers? We'll see. So I'd say, yeah, that's Trevor Lawrence throwing a lot of balls, and I think you're right that there's some with Uranus at 0 degrees in the seventh house, that there's some interceptions going on. I think there's a lot of air though, so I would take the over generally on the quarterbacks putting up a lot of air
Yeah.
versus thinking that this is going to be a running game. Does that mean there's going to be a lot of points? I don't know. I kind of have my doubts about that. But then the 49ers are going to be Mercury. Mercury is up arching towards the highest point in the sky at the moment that the game starts, which gives it a lot of dignity. And it does aspect the descendant, right? It does aspect the descendant by trying 70 degrees to 19 degrees. So it is reaching. And to me, that shows like, well, Purdy comes back and he's pretty on target.
Yeah.
That's like he's slinging the ball and he's pretty on target and he's getting it. Now, the last degree that the moon made was the last aspect that the moon made was to Venus. And so the last aspect goes towards the challenging team, according to Bonatti. And that Venus it's in its fall, it's conjunct the south node, even though by whole sign it's in the 10th house. I think that's they're coming in, they're feeling good, they're feeling strong, but they're not as strong or good as they think they are. And they're going to run into a very well coached 49ers team. The next aspect the moon makes, well, it's not going to make an aspect. Oh, no, it's going to encounter Saturn. It's going to square Saturn down here in Pisces. This would be the moon moving towards the 49ers. Maybe the defense of Jacksonville is stronger than they can handle. Maybe this does indicate that they get some sacks. So I don't know. Mercury has dignity by being in the air triplicity. Jupiter has dignity by being in exaltation and rulership. I'm going to lean towards the 49ers first
Okay.
half,
Yeah.
having more points at the end of the first half because of for the main reason that the rulers is aspecting the descendant for the 49ers, and the ruler of the Jaguars is not aspecting it.
Can
So
I
I
say
think
something?
I think the Jaguars make a lot of yardage, but they don't necessarily make a lot of red zone point. And the 49ers make a lot of yardage and they get the ball in. Then I'm going to move over here towards the second half. And at the second half, we're going to see the ruler of the Jaguars become Saturn retrograde in the third house. And this just feels slogged down to me. This does not feel like an air game anymore. And then Jupiter moves into the seventh house, conjuncting the descendant for the 49ers. Yeah, I've got to give it to the 49ers.
Okay.
I think we're all on the 49ers at this point.
Yeah. All including Frawley, you, me, Bonattis.
Yes, yeah.
I think it's interesting.
The 49ers, they're predicted to win by 3.5. Do you think
Oh,
they beat the spread? Yeah, you do? Yeah.
I did you.
Yeah, I do. I think they beat the spread, which it really shocks me. I think they're a bad team right now.
Yeah.
But I'm yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Over or under 47.5.
You call it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, Jupiter conjunct the descendant in the second half of the game. That's in Cancer. That seems to me like a lot of points because the Saturn is here in the third house, kind of not so involved in the game anymore. Yeah, maybe I'd go with the over. Maybe I'd go with the over. A lot of air yards there. Okay, here's the next one. This one's for you, Christian McCaffrey. Will he score a touchdown? Let's go to the initial horary chart or the initial event chart to get that a little bit. Christian McCaffrey, do you see him scoring a touchdown?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
in the chart.
In the chart. I don't see it in the chart. If you see it, talk to
No,
me about it.
but where would you see that in the chart? Where would you see the famous running back, the famous San Francisco running back, scoring or not scoring a chart?
I'm just thinking, for me, this, and I know it's a very slow moving set of planets, but for me, the Uranus trine Pluto and then the involvement with the air signs, it's like, ooh, some excitement, some movement. And I do think that could be like a really gorgeous pass to run it into the end zone, like that type of situation where it's just like, wow. Like exciting to watch. And we have had a couple of games the past couple of weeks, at least while this has been especially active, where that has been the case. But, also NFL football, so we can kind of expect some artistry where that's concerned. What do you
True.
think?
Yeah. I think the running game's going to get stifled.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
all across the board. Mars to me represents a running back, and that's in the 12th house. It's coming off of a square Pluto, but I think it's going to be a little bit stifled. I'm not necessarily going to take that bet.
okay.
I'm more likely to take Trevor Lawrence over 223 yards because there's so much air in this chart.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
get behind that.
They don't have they don't have props on the quarterback yet because they don't know if it's going to be Purdy or not. So that's the essence of where I'm coming from and what I see in the chart. Do you have any other thoughts, or do you see anything in here that's interesting?
Do you mind if I share the triple chart with the event? And because I have a couple of things that, because I wasn't stuck with this week, but I wasn't as like, oh, this is what's going on. But
Cool.
innermost wheel here is the game. That's what we've been talking about. It's in the whole
Oh, I
sign.
love it when you do this. I love it when you do this, Jess.
This
Uh,
middle wheel is the Jaguars. The outer wheel
yeah.
is the 49ers. Now, usually I use noon charts. I've been playing with the 6 a.m. chart for the Jaguars because that's when the headline came out in the newspaper that they were a team on November 30th, 1993. Is it perfect? Who's to say? But at least we have maybe a working ascendant where that's concerned. Now, what is of interest to me, particularly where these two teams are playing, the moon associated with the 49ers is somewhere in Scorpio. Again, this is a noon chart. So we know it's in the sign of Scorpio, but we don't know the
Hmm.
exact. it is probably within range of Mercury
Mm,
as well as Pluto. And what was
hmm
outstanding to me, as soon as I saw that, specifically Moon aspecting Pluto, I'm like, oh, the 49ers dominate the Jaguars. And I don't know, I really don't know. These are not things that I track, but I did look at their past wins versus losses, and the 49ers have a 5-2 sort of dominance of wins over the Jaguars. And for me, it's like when
Yep.
they are reflexively moving, they can sort of undermine, I find, the overall power of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so that was like, interesting. Now, in terms of these broader transits, I like to look at what's going on in terms of the narrative of these teams. The transiting Jupiter, yes, it's going to station retrograde. It's going to swing back to the earlier degrees of Cancer shortly here, but we have an upcoming conjunction between the transiting Jupiter and the 49ers North Node. For me, that looks good for them. That looks generally good for them. That won't be for a while, but nonetheless, it's within range now. I think that's significant. That's bolstering their overall performance. Now, what we see here is the transiting Uranus is actually within, about 2 degrees, a little bit less than 2 degrees of the Jaguar South node. I don't see Uranus, as we've talked about, as an outright malefic planet, but it's like, ooh, something weird's going on. And the way that I do work with the South Node, which I know is variable person to person, astrologer to astrologer, tradition to a tradition, South Node's not fun. When we have conjunctions to the South Node, the transiting South Node conjoins our planets. No, absolutely not. Not a good time. And so this feels like there's some type of shakeup. I don't know if Trevor Lawrence is going to be benched. I feel like that is a kind of a reach to even say, but it feels like not right this second, but when Uranus stations direct and pushes back into Gemini for the longer haul, there's going to be some big changes. I mean, also with the 49ers, because that's their Uranus return, but specifically with like the sources of power, stability, what is going on here? I'm just curious. I mean, their Mercury's not going to get too much action for a little bit. They will get a square from the transiting Jupiter around that time or slightly after. But I'm looking at Mercury. Yeah, I just think I don't see the Jaguars at like a nice stride currently. I don't see them at like their most winning at this current juncture across 2025 and into 2026 even. Do you see anything outstanding?
I personally I like Mars conjunct Jupiter.
Okay.
Mars conjuncting their
Yes,
their
yes,
natal
yes.
Jupiter, and I might be like, okay, now I'm going to say the Jaguars are going to win. Seeing that,
That
no,
that
really,
that
I
threw
mean,
me too.
yeah. What's that?
That threw
Yeah,
me off too because that's an exact conjunction.
yeah. That's really impressive, and the reason is because again, like we talked about last week, the NFL football field is a battlefield.
Yes.
And Mars is the planet of the battlefield, and it is in Scorpio, and may yeah, I'm going to go with the Jaguars now that I see.
Okay.
And so this is interesting to me because I'm pretty much always relying on the battlefield methodology of the traditional astrology, and this is not the battlefield methodology. This is transit to a natal chart. And if the Jaguars came into existence the day before, that Jupiter placement's not changing. This is still going to be an aspect that's occurring. Oh, just the Jupiter conjunct the North Node. So that's not going to aspect until the season's over. And
Okay.
that's really interesting for me in what that holds for them because the North Node is some type of tremendous growth. And they have a solid coach. They have a solid quarterback. They have a solid running back. They have solid receivers. Where is that growth coming from? What kind of change is that going to be at the end of the season? I'm really, really curious about that. Uranus conjunct the South Node for the Jaguars. Again, that's going to be after the season. That very well could be a new quarterback coming in.
Okay.
I'm with you on that. I could see that as Trevor Lawrence just as maybe he gets traded, maybe he gets let go of, maybe they draft a really young, great quarterback out of college. Maybe they just kind of move on to the idea like, hey, we have all the pieces, but Trevor Lawrence just going to deliver in it. We're going to make a change because I do like thinking of Gemini as being one of the signs indicative of the quarterback in the chart. So appreciative of that. That's great. Oh boy, that thank you for showing that to me.
Of course.
Still, like this is just one of those games where I'm not so sure that I would put money on it. It's not 100% clear to me, just like last week's game wasn't 100% clear. The first two games were very clear in
I
my
agree.
mind.
I
Yeah.
agree very much. It was a game where as I was prepping and I was hemming and hawing, and usually that's not a good sign for me.
Yes, yeah.
Especially, and you caught it, that Mars conjoining the Jupiter for the Jaguars. I feel like that is supporting their overall efforts, which is like, okay, I'm going with the 49ers. Frawley said the 49ers. I don't know if I should side with Frawley, but this is where we're at.
Yeah, and it's, as we study this,
Yeah.
I'm really curious in the learning to see like, well, when is it best to apply a nuance technique,
Yeah.
such as, well, Bonattis or Frawleys? Those are very nuanced techniques. They're calculating dignities, picking out which is the ascendant and which one's the descendant, where the moon's going, the part of fortune's going, the anticion, nuance, super detailed, versus when is it just like, okay, well, the moon is conjunct the ascendant here, or Mars is conjunct the natal Jupiter of the team's charts, and a very simple, just yes, no, black and white. I find this in horary too,
Okay.
that you can really like lose the answer getting into the weeds of the horary question. And sometimes it's just the first thing you see is the answer.
Really? That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, do you experience that sometimes?
Oh, I do. In this space in particular, it's a little bit of a challenge because what I have running in the background for me is our predictions, but then I do a few where it's me trying to hone the practice. So, like, I predicted for the Lions and Ravens, and
Mhm.
if we're just looking superficially, Mars was at home in the sign of Scorpio in the seventh house. For me, that is reflecting the Ravens. And I'm like,
Right.
oh, easy, easy. Ravens are going to win. Let's do it superficially. Just take it as for what it is. That was not the case, as you know. At first, they were neck and neck, but as it progressed, it was like, well, I guess go Lions, which
The
I love.
Lions win.
No,
Yeah.
I love to see it. But and so with that in mind, I want to take it at the superficial level, but then thinking through your method of tracking the ascendant as the game progresses, that is what helped to make sense of what that win was about for the Lions. So I don't, what is the line? What is the line that we draw? Do we go with that first gut instinct, or is it beneficial to spend time looking at these layers?
Well, that's the art of it. That is the art of astrology. That's why it's called an art, because
Absolutely.
there are so many nuanced layers. And I believe that's why real astrology will never be practiced by AI. No matter how much people want to download the apps or subtly refine the algorithms, but there's an art, there's a point of insight, and the chart is meant to be a way of gaining that insight. And so then we're looking through these, just different analysis and going back and forth. But then I see that, that Mars conjunct Jupiter. To me, that's just like overwhelming insight. Like, oh, there's something here. Anyways, we will know on Sunday evening. It's going to be a great game. I hope if you watch this YouTube, you watch the game and you track the astrology and leave a comment about what you thought about how the game was or the way you thought it might have gone. If you have any different opinions, let us know. And thank you very much for watching. And thank you, Jess. I learned so much from you every time we do this.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.